Who's that coming in? No, Ingrid, you can't be a councillor. So. The pay's not good, so you wouldn't want it. Yep, yep. Page 45, Stavros. Oh, Potter, yes, we have got a quorum. Thank you, Potawa. You're both elected members, so it's good. Yep, and yep. Okay, refer you to page 45. We're moving forward to Stavros because he's got a conference to go to shortly. So, Stavros, would you like to highlight particularly the weather one which came up in the previous report and what sort of cost levels we're facing in terms of that? Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will take the rest of the report as read and happy to respond to any questions with regard to transport waste and three waters. I think the pertinent point of interest to elected members, it would be the consequences and the actions taken during the recent weather events. As you're all aware, between mid-March and early April, we experienced three significant weatherfront events. Those events have generated a significant demand for a response, an immediate response, to the calls. I think from memory, we've got something in the region about 900 locations in the district where landslips, localized or focused flooding or minor sort of damage, to infrastructure has occurred. Our primary consideration during those times was to maintain our ability to navigate into the district, protect obviously the well-being of people, and any to minimize the risk to any individual property and businesses. Again, as I said, the cyclones Debbie and Cook, Cyclone Debbie was the one that generated the Bay of Plenty Regional Civil Defense Emergency Declaration. And of course, the consequence of that, as you know, has significant damage in the Eastern Bay of Plenty with regards to Edgecumbe, Whakatane, and so on. So in parallel with our efforts to respond to the impacts onto what happened in our district, we have been on standby as an emergency operations center and the civil defense in emergency requirements of the district. But at the same time, we have provided human expertise and technical assistance to the region as it was required. One of the fundamental lessons and extracts from those events from mid-March to early April is that small districts like Whakatane, they seem to be ill-equipped in terms of human resource and skill capacity to deal with all the consequences. And obviously that throws into the mix thoughts as to how we can continue to maintain our readiness. You will be aware that we chose not to fully activate our emergency operations center. And the reason for that, I believed as the lead agent for civil defense, during these events, that our normal business as usual extension of our services could cope with that, because mobilizing the emergency operations center and taking a civil defense approach to the whole process could throw in the mix a number of other complications. However, during that event, we undertook significant consultation and communication and collaboration with other emergency services, for example, the DHP, the fire service, the New Zealand police, lifelines, and so on. So we were all in a state of readiness to respond to events. Fundamentally, and while we're still assessing the damages from those events, what we estimate at the moment is that we have somewhere in the region of about $1.3 million worth of damage to our roading infrastructure. I would like to remind everyone here that out of 1,000 kilometers of roads, somewhere in the region about 750 kilometers are in the rural area, i.e. 75% of the network, which of course are not always easy to monitor because of the extended distances. We have applied to NZTA for emergency assistance, and that emergency assistance from NZTA will comprise about 52% of the capital cost to rectify those works, and over $1 million, the emergency assistance escalates to about 65%. So every dollar over $1 million damage, the financial assistance we get from NZTA is about 65% of the costs. Concurrent with that, you would recall that during March and April we had a couple of events in our wastewater treatment facilities, whereby the capacity of the plant to receive and treat and pump to the forest was exceeded in a couple of locations. Hydrological information we received during the time indicated that the amount of rain that fell into those short period of few weeks exceeded the average about 280%. What's as an indicative figure for that is that our sewage waste treatment plant in the city, the highest wet weather flow received earlier was 41,000 cubic meters of wastewater in 1999. During the March and April events, it exceeded 71,000 cubic meters of wastewater. So I think in broad terms, the issues in my mind, both as an infrastructure acting manager and also from a civil defense controller perspective, question number one, have we done the right things? I think our posture has been the right in view of what was emerging. We were ready to respond, and we had all the right contacts and networks to respond to that. Were we lucky? To some degree, yes. We took a glancing blow from Cyclone Debbie. Third thing is that what kind of lessons we received with regards to the capacity of our infrastructure to deal with this kind of events. There are indications that we need to continue to work in the long term to identify reasons why we have high inflow and infiltration in our wastewater system. We need to re-examine some critical parts of our stormwater network to ask the question, is the current level of service, which when you look at it, most of the stormwater systems were built in the 50s and 60s. They were complying with their then standards. We're coming towards the golden years of that network in terms of age. We need to ask the question, are there critical parts of the network that need enhancement of our stormwater capacity? And our roading system, obviously, we did not lose connectivity, a significant connectivity to anywhere. So therefore, we will continue to ask the question, are there things that we can do to improve drainage, to improve navigation, to improve stability of embankments, and so on. None of these are short-term solutions. These are part and parcel of our long-term infrastructure strategy, and we'll continue to work through that. But again, I'll remind us that yes, it was a significant event. Yes, 900 locations. Estimated damage is close to about $2.3 million altogether. A lot of these works will be addressed during next financial year because we are in the process of assessing and measuring and geotechnical assessment of the damage, and by the time we do design and tendering and doing the work to be the new financial year. Our current financial capacity, and as projected in year 3 of the annual plan, probably includes a significant portion of this work. So, in our 3 waters, in our transport, we've got combinedly somewhere in the region of about $15-16 million of renewals capital programs. The majority of these works could be embedded into the works programs for next financial year. I think that's in a highlight. That's what I have to say. I'm more than happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stavros. That the big concern for me is the extra 30,000 cubic meters going into our. I mean, we have experienced growth, but we haven't had the number of dwellings that would produce nearly double the cubic meterage of going into our wastewater treatment station. So, the question I have of you: how vigorous do we need to be to ensure that stormwater is not going into our sewer? Because that's obviously what's happening.
Again, I think I've made a comment some time ago, or in previous conversations, that during wet weather, people don't go to the toilet or to the bathroom more often than normally, and therefore the direct connotation is that when you have excess flows over the normal average 18,000 cubic meters a day, it means that you have stormwater entering the system. What we have done since the last few weeks, we started a process right now where we are analyzing the data from our pump stations, and we're going to do two things. One is to narrow down into the catchment areas that contribute to the biggest variation between dry weather and wet weather flow. Once we narrow those catchments, we're going to start reverse engineering to to investigate and ask what are the likely causes. And as I said, I think the last O&M meeting probably is a program that will be with us for the next 10, 15 years in gradually assessing the worst identified areas with regards to cross connections, illegal connections, infiltration, and so on. Again, I would like to remind elected members that out of our switch network, even if we manage to eliminate completely the infiltration from cracked pipes on the public system, the public system is no more than 50% of the total system. 50% of the system, it's sitting on private properties. Is yours and my private sewer pipe that goes from our toilet and bathroom into these pipes. So therefore, we need to work together with private property owners to establish some kind of inspection and assessment of the condition of those networks. But we have to start the work, and we have started the work.
Thank you, Stavros. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Stavros, and congratulations for tremendous effort that you and our staff have done during these very, very tough times. The question I've got is just on the page 45, 1, 2, 3, the third bullet point, wastewater. The question is, so we have to go to seek specialists from Australia. Do we not have any of that in New Zealand, as well as some of the parts that are needed, got to be sourced from overseas as well? So it's just a query from me is, do we not have any of those things required here in New Zealand?
These are materials that need to be imported from Australia, and there's specific manufacturing, specific products that we have to import. We haven't got available here in New Zealand.
And the specialists?
Yeah.
Also, we don't have any in New Zealand.
No, and also remember that if you're going to buy a product from some or particular configuration, you want to get a specialist who on that, so to make sure we maintain the guarantees, of that system. So if you get something and install it through someone else, you start diluting the guarantees of the system.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for Stavros. Stavros, have we pursued all avenues there is available to us to try and reduce the levels of the lake so that we can cut back on the damage that's incurred at the moment?
Well, we are talking to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council constantly about that. I think for those of you, obviously, who have a lot longer in the district, the Rotorua Lake is connected to Rotoiti Lake through a channel. And obviously the amount of water that can be drained out of Rotorua Lake is commensurate to the capacity of that channel, direct water. I'm told by the regional council that the O'Keefe Falls, or sluice valves are fully open, and to drain them. I was reading some statistics a couple of days ago, which it indicates in the last 2-3 weeks the lake only dropped by 100 millimeters, and it just indicates how much storage capacity these lakes got. I'm not aware of anything that the regional council is doing at this point in time to constrain the reduction of the levels of the lakes, although during the events that damaged Edgecombe, obviously the regional council was initially concerned as to how much water from the upper catchments going to the lower catchments, and they were a bit careful about that. But at the moment, to the best of my knowledge, they are draining the lakes as fast as they can. But we do have very high water levels at the moment everywhere you go, so obviously that process is going to be slow.
It's just a follow-up question to that. So who is responsible for properties on the Waititi stream, the Nongataha stream, the Udahina, foreshore, when there is damage? We're not. Is it Environment Bay of Plenty?
Well, that's the same similar discussions we've been having with the Upper Nongataha. The Bay of, we don't control the water, the water streams, the water courses. Obviously, there are environmental regulations as to what one has to do to access, the water courses, through resource concerns. But the regional councils, have not been undertaking a systematic way of managing the water courses, and the stream beds, because to a large degree they say that nature will take its course. Now I'm not prepared to talk about any liabilities, but the responsibility and lead agency role rests with the regional council who controls water courses. Whether their actions are in compliance with their water management plans is a different story, but that's their responsibility.
Our guidance for lake levels some time ago, and Councillor Martin, myself and Councillor Kenny voted against them increasing the level of Lake Rotorua, because a lot of us, we got advice from iwi, from members of the community that we've all represented for a long, long time. They said rather it be lower than higher, so they increased it, and of course now we've got huge erosion. It's amazing. Right around Kawa Point, they've lost big stretches of land. So someone's got to reinstate. You're saying the lead agency is EBOP. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bentley? Done me? Councillor Gould?
Chairman, with the erosion around the properties, can we restrict how close some of the tourist operators go, or where the float plane takes off from, or the pedal steamer? Can we restrict, move it out further out, because you've got the weight from some of these vehicles which are also causing problems with the erosion on a number of properties around the Kaua Point area?
I'm pretty sure we can have a conversation with it. I'm not quite sure what's our I suppose enforcement and capabilities are, but I'll follow up with it. I'm not sure.
Councillor Hunt?
Thank you. Actually, the Regional Council have put out a couple of press releases. The gates have been open for 4 weeks prior to the last rain event. They're still open. They've taken the logs out. There are slow zones in Rotorua around Okawa Bay already for vehicles, so that there isn't the wash, and I'm sure that they are putting those in place. And the lake is draining as quickly as it possibly can. So it's one of those factors that generally there's about a 600 mil change in Lake Rotorua itself. It's dropped 200 millimetres in the last couple of weeks. Rotorua's dropped 100 millimetres. It is all on the Bay of Plenty website. They are putting out those press releases for people to keep updated, and you can sign up for that. But there's not much we can do, because they are weather-related events, other than take a lot of care in vehicles on the lakes for those people who live around the shore, and to keep an eye on the levels.
Would have heard the news today, a new cyclone called Danny has formed off Vanuatu that we'll probably get the end of in 10 days' time, according to the Meteorological Service. Potawa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Stavros. I once again just want to commend you and your team for a stellar job over the weather bomb. And you mentioned that there was minimal disruption to the road. I think there was a block out at Rotorua. It's not the first time it's happened on that particular stretch. Are there any mitigating risk factors that we're going to be doing? I think it might be the third time in maybe 12 months.
I think that's the State Highway 30, and I think the chair of the Lakes Community Board, Phil Thomas, asked me a few days ago as to follow up with NZTA to find out what is the rate of progress for clearing the slip. And coincidentally, after I spoke to them, they cleared it the next day, so it was quite good. It made me look good. But the point is that when they have slips like that, they have to undertake careful geotechnical assessment of the risk, and take some time for that to take place. Again, like any roading authority, it's always got to be a balance of cost and risk, and they would say, and I don't, you're right, I think there were a couple of similar slips, in the area in the past. And they would say, okay, well, the cost of removing the slip would be X, the cost of building some retaining structures would be Y. What kind of intervention is justified? Yes, like everything else, there are technical solutions to that. The question is that how much money is to be spent and what are the consequent benefits of that and who's paying for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stavros, Paradise Valley and the Nongatawa Valley River and the Tongaroa River that runs off the tributary. I understand we've been given an extension of time before Fish and Game require us to close the actual entry into the river. Any idea of the timers?
No, I think this timing was until the the first week of May. But I might be wrong. But we had to do some work, on Paradise Valley to remove the stump, and we were asked to do the work before the end of this week.
Yeah.
So I'm not aware of any further extension. I might be wrong, but that's all I'm aware of.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, it's a tradition to have the valley closed up, as we call it, for Fish and Game, for spawning trout, 1st of May to the end of October. And that's a long period of time for, if the council's going to have to do any work in the river, which they're going to have to do on the sides. So I point that out to regional council, really, that what comes first, the trout or the people? This is the problem we've got out there. Stavros is correct, I think, with his answer. It's 1st of May. It's worrying us because we need to enter the stream to be able to actually work.
Thank you very much, Stavros, and likewise. Here's me telling you to put your mics on. Thank you for being light-footed in circumstances. I mean, I've seen slips, the Danzies, Hamarana, State Highway 5, around Paradise Valley, all around the place, and 900. It's just a huge amount of incidences. So to pass on to your team and to who works with you in terms of consultation, and also the working in conjunction with your worship, in terms of keeping a finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening in the Bay of Plenty, and the staff and expertise that went over there to assist. So thank you very much for that. Mr. Waru, finally.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Stavros, ka pai. Just a couple of quick questions. The page 45 are referring to that page. Lakefront is being fenced off and there's some renovations going to be happening. What's the work plan and the timetable there, and will it be done by the Lions tour?
Because of the increased level of water, of the water level in the lake, some of the pavers, water gone under through the rock, the rock walls and sucked out the underlying sand. So we started work, in repairing it. The plan is really to finish all this work within the next couple of weeks. So be ready for the Lions tour.
Just one more question, just in terms of the landfill, the leaking into from the storm water. It's mentioned there that they attended it and they sort of stopped it, but are there any preventative measures being put in place?
Yes, the landfill, like any other or other facilities, received an exceptionally high level of stormwater. And again, just to remind us all, about a year and a half ago, when we talked about the future of the landfill, we have identified that our historical infrastructure for the landfill caused us some risks. And the current plan is to bring the landfill to a level where it's safe and cap it and seal it, and then we sit down and to look into the long-term future of the landfill. Unfortunately, on the events of especially early April, the amount of stormwater was far more than the capacity of the storage ponds up there and exceeded, overflow. And of course, we're in the process with the regional council. We received an abatement notice from the regional council, and we're working with them to respond to that. So actions have been taken in response to that event. I'm pretty confident that if we have managed to arrest the overflow during that event, then it will take an exceptionally high event to cause the same problem again. Just for your update, I would expect with the current progress, the landfill should be reached the final levels and be capped and sealed by December this year. And then after that, it's going to be just a transfer station until we decide the long-term future of the landfill and who's paying for it and how it's going to be done from there on. But we address those issues at the moment.
Thank you, Stavros. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Stavros, for your report. We'll now move back to page JP. We'll move back to economic growth portfolio on page 43, followed by sport and recreation, inner city and creative. Anything you want to highlight in the economic growth? I mean, we covered the GEEKS report with Rotorua, that's covered. Tourism strategy, any questions, anything you want to highlight?
No, not at this stage, Mr.
Any
Chair.
questions on that? Oh, thank you, JP, for the long walk. Rob, bottom 43, page 43. Bottom of page 43, sport and recreation portfolio. Rob, if Mr. Pikethley's here, if he to answer any questions. Otawa.
Just want to make a comment about page 44, the affinity light sculpture that was in the city focus. Brilliant. Our office is just down the road from there, and as the sun came down, hundreds of people would go over and interact with the display. And the feedback I've had is that was great because it was all ages, low intensity, and the hope was that we'd get more exhibitions like that around the city. So yeah, well done with that affinity.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Okawate, then Mr. Waru.
It's actually on the inner city portfolio, Mr.
Yep.
Chair. That's on page 44. I just wondered, it says...
Stayed up there, mate.
Yeah, just,
So, yeah,
they're just talking about the starting the second version of the inner city revitalisation strategy, and I just wondered about any heads up on that. I mean, I can't recall when the second... What are we actually talking about there? Are we talking about taking it further out, like we were talking about some time ago? Is that exactly what we're thinking about there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's actually starting to think about, as we started to signal in so I'll start with the spatial plan discussion document. So as you saw from that discussion document, we started to signal in there this focus on looking at those key reserves that fringe the inner city. And so one of the pressures that we've got, of course, with the inner city is, so where do we go next? So that first inner city revitalisation strategy was kind of the first strategy we had in place. We've invested in a number of intersections, and obviously the stuff on Hope Upper Street and Tanakai has been a key focus for us. So one of the things we're looking at doing is looping back through that inner city steering group and starting to have that conversation about, well, what is the key focus areas potentially for version 2 of that strategy, and how does that link with some of the things we're starting to identify within the spatial planning conversation. So that's the first start of that discussion. The other key thing is also how do we try and encourage some of those changes in use that we've talked about for a number of years around inner city living, but also to consolidate retail down onto that key spine. As we're all aware, our CBD is extremely large compared with the needs of a city of 70 to 100 odd thousand. So that's going to have to be an area for us just to look at over time. And is there any other mechanisms we might need to look at? So that's been part of that conversation, A, with developers, and B, to start talking to that inner city steering group and retailers group in and around the spatial plan. So out the back of this, we'll also start looking at, well, what does this mean for a version 2 of this strategy?
I'd like to add a few things that have been happening there. Part of it is what happens to the inner city focus group and the block champions, sort of where do they evolve to next. So there have been a number of conversations held with the Chamber of Commerce, and they're very keen, and so is the inner city focus group, to in fact morph in together. The strength of that means that the chamber will canvass their network of retailers and business owners, and then they will help create their vision of what they want the city to be, which is really where we wanted to get to that point, so that as a council we are responding to something driven by the community, and specifically the community of interest who own and operate those businesses, as opposed to us coming to them and having them just reflect back whether they like it or not. And I think a great success that's come out of the work that they've done is in fact the parking. And I noted earlier in Thomas's report there's been a $140,000 increase in parking revenue. Now the parking project was driven by the Inner City Focus Group and the Block Champions. We set one up one Christmas, we changed it the next Christmas. They then had the opportunity to create a plan to see would it work, the free bits and the pay meters. And we know that 140,000 increase in revenue is a really good success. That's not to say that parking won't evolve, and it will evolve again with guidance and drive from this group. So we're not quite there yet moving in with the chamber, but we have had discussions. Both sides are very happy with that, and it will add enormous strength to the inner city revitalisation. So it won't be just a small group trying to reach out to others. It will be a very large group informing the rest of the community where they see the city going.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question for Rob. With the presentation at the last O&M meeting, I think it was, on the proposed skate park upgrade, and you had a wide-ranging budget. You know, it was from 400 to 1 point something. Have you tightened that up, and have we got anything come to report back on?
We have got something, Councillor Bentley, and we can review that in the performance and delivery section. When we do the sport and rec operations, we'll actually have a short presentation on that, which should give you a lot more clarity, and we can address that question then.
Hello, Mr. Chair. I'm just referring to page 48, if I can. Just in terms of the, because JP's there says the Resource Management Amendment Bill, Kōrero. Just wondering where we're at with that. When is that going to be enacted? Because we're interested in the process and the timeframes. And when I talk about us, of particular interest is the mana whakahono iwi agreements that you're quite aware of. A number of te rawa iwi and hapu will be seeking to have these implemented. So how is Council preparing, I suppose, for these in terms of skill sets, resourcing and a work plan?
It's a very good question, and we have immediately moved into starting to look at what the implications are for us as a council and the way we operate. And so I'll start at one place and then I'll hand over to Jason just to carry forward from that. One of the key ones that's been identified in Jason's contribution into this report was that comment around financial contributions. So, you know, councillors, as you're aware, we took away development contributions about 3 years ago, which was sort of that opportunity to obtain money from development to invest usually in the infrastructure that goes on green grass. So we were relying still on our financial contributions around the reserve contributions. So with the view that those are phasing out, we need to start looking about what that means for future residential subdivisions and for those reserve contributions. So already the staff are starting to talk about, well, what does that mean? What are the implications for that? And clearly as we grow, we will need further reserves in new neighbourhood areas and things like that. So if we've lost the financial contributions mechanism, what do we have to do about it, and how do we address that? And in this case, we may have to go back to a development contribution specifically for that reserve element. But we'll have to see. So that's part of that conversation to take place in the next few weeks, few years for us as part of that plan change. Now, there's a lot in the RMA stuff. So if I hand across now to Jason, he can try and more cover off some of those other elements as well.
Thanks, JP, and yes, timely question. The Resource Management Act, Amendment Act, has gone through and is actually in force. MFE have just recently produced fact sheets on every single change, which we're actually going through and actually meeting with MFE officials tomorrow. Some of them have immediate effect, though some of those are around sort of managing natural hazards and bringing more focus into the RMA on those. Others will be within 6 months, and then financial contributions phased out over 5 years. So in my summary, I just gave a very high level. There is many pages and fact sheets to read. There's changes to fast-tracking certain resource consent applications. As a council, we've actually been there for a while on those got a system in place to actually get those easier consents out quicker. There's changes that council staff will have discretion on if it contravenes a rule in a district plan, being able to actually waive the need for a resource consent, and there's some guidelines around that. Example being, say, if you've got to be 2.5 metres from a boundary and you're just slightly within it, there is discretion for council to actually say, well, what's it going to, but happy to advise further as well as we go through. Most changes 6 months to 5 years. There's some mandatory things that have to happen within certain periods, one of those being national planning standards, so actually having consistent standards around the country for the district plan, and looking at, of course, we've just implemented district plan, and getting head around exactly what is that and the implications for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just actually about customer solutions on page 47. I think it's really important that council is kept up to date and informed of key issues that are happening in the community. And I've noticed with the customer solutions for a number of months now, there's been a growing trend of higher than normal volume of calls. Is it possible for us to get a short report in the next operations just about what those key issues are that they're calling in? Because if we've got 10,000 people from our community calling in 1 month, it would be nice to know what those areas are around. Major areas.
Yeah, we can take that message back. That's not a problem. I think in the past they have signalled some of the things that have been happening, the transition around the waste service, and then obviously we've had a couple of major weather events. So, but we can give you probably, and it's probably worthwhile looking back at the last 3 or 4 months to see what the patterns have been across those different months. So we'll take that off to the manager to bring into the next report.
Just a way of reporting that I know CAB and an old reporting methodology I was used to, we just got a pie graph, and so we could log the calls into a category, and then you could ask the questions on the subcategory. Quite interesting about rental requests or housing or subdivisions or whatever. That would be easier than a written report, because it would generate for us to see the volume of where they're shifting to.
To be jumping around quite a bit. So I'll go back to page 46. We've done transport. Are there any questions on the Highway? There weren't during the general debate. Waste management we've covered. Yes, Your Worship.
Sport, just, I don't think, we always get complaints, but the Tarawera roundabout reseal, I'm getting, well, nobody rings to thank you really, but I'm getting very good feedback that it's a good smooth finish. You just finish one, and the other night I heard about Ferry Springs Road, and the roundabout. So I just wonder if someone could, this is what happens. You fix one and another one bubbles out. But, yeah. No, it was at the lights at Kotu, yeah. So, you just fix one and another one pops out, but yeah, it's great.
I've seen a lot of people taking photos at the front of the museum, and someone asked me, is there a necessity to have those particular gates? I know it's to keep people out, but is there a more attractive safety guard rail that you can still get the photo without having that fence line? Just a question.
Not that I know of, unless we put glass up, which is going to be pretty expensive, I would think. But some of the signs have already come down, so the social room that was open over summer, their signage has come down, and we certainly can reduce the information signage down. I think we've got 4 up currently, so we can probably reduce it down to 2 to take that pressure off. I think once we get the full DSA, then we'll be in a position to know whether we can remove the fence or what we need to do with it.
Rotorua Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just, it was just in relation to the question that Rawiri asked in terms of the RMA. And I'm just hoping that Te Tātou Aotearoa will actually come to the fore and assist Council to look at what a working partnership might look like in terms of the RMA. Because we've already got the vibe from throughout the country, throughout the motu, and so there's an opportunity to proactively work to develop something that we want to get right. So it cannot just be left. It cannot just be left to council alone. That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Sorry about that, Stuart, but just, I know we're waiting the report, but with our digital geeks and their cleverness, could we do a virtual 3D tour of the library so that could be a mark, they could have walked through what it was like. It's once you get your final report. Because I agree, I see so many people up there peering through the fence, but they can't even imagine what it used to look like inside that building. So it's just an opportunity for, a tour, a 3D tour.
It's possible. I mean, we've already 3D scanned the building, so we already have quite a lot of data in terms of what we can put together in terms of a model to view. That sort of technology to be able to do that is pretty expensive. So I'm sure Poto would know better than I would what the sort of cost would be to do the whole building, but it's certainly an option. And it's something we're planning in terms of an exhibition about what's happened to the building when we reopen. So we're really capturing a lot of that information. Excuse me.
Thank you, Chairman. And just through the Chair, I'll take, in the interest of time, I'll take the Sport and Recreation report as read. Stephanie Kelly here has been doing a lot of work on the engagement for the skate park, so we could have a very quick run through to update you of where we are with that, and then take questions on that afterwards, and any other questions in regard to the Sport and Recreation report, if that's okay with you. Okay.
Thank you, Rob. So I just want to give you an update today on the skate park upgrade project. So I'll just run through a bit of the background, the process that we've gone through to come up with the design, and then the next steps from there. So just to remind you where this project came from, Council received 3 submissions through the 2015-25 long-term plan requesting an upgrade to the skate park. The submissions identified a number of issues with the existing facility, including health and safety, the existing design, and really that they thought it was an eyesore and they wanted a bit more of a better facility that they could feel proud of. As a result of that, the skate park upgrade was included in the long-term plan and staff were directed to work with the users to come up with the design, identify some costs and to identify an appropriate location. So in terms of process, we established a project team which included council staff and users of the skate park. Those users represent multiple disciplines, so BMX, skating, scooter. We also engaged a specialist skate park designer. That was quite key to the process and on the recommendation of a number of other councils who have undertaken similar projects. It is a very specialist field, so we felt like we needed some really good advice on that. We also, in addition to holding numerous project team meetings, we also held a workshop at the skate park and invited users to attend to provide us feedback directly. In terms of the location, this was a hot topic of discussion, but the advice that we've received from the users is that actually the existing location is the best, and there's a few reasons for that. One being that we can reuse the existing infrastructure that's there in terms of the concrete pad. It's got really good sight levels, so that the bund can be used to provide drop-ins down and other technical skating terms. But also the key thing for me was about visibility into the site, and the skaters actually felt like that made the site safer, visibility from adjoining properties but also vehicles passing. One of the first things that we did as part of the process was to identify what was important for the design. So they essentially became the design principles and what the design, which I'll show you in a minute, was based on. So essentially that it should integrate with the existing site and use the features of the existing site, that it must cater for a variety of users and a range of abilities, so from small children up to skilled adults. The inclusion of skatable art features, and that reflects what's unique to Rotorua. Be able to provide for events at different levels and to provide landscape features that you would see on parks generally in terms of shade, seating, those types of things. So the concept design that we have come up with includes a number of different sections. Open plaza environment, mogu land, pool bowl, you'll see what they look like in a minute. We're also proposing to build a new car park off Pererika Street with a new vehicle access. The existing car park is very small and actually the vehicle access isn't very safe to get off Amaho Street. The design has also been developed in a way that it can be staged, so it doesn't need to all happen at once, which is probably quite key for further discussions. So this is the design. I don't know if it's very easy to see. Is this the pointer? It's okay. So, oh, here we go. This area on the Plaza Street Flow section is essentially what's existing. So that would remain as a kind of open space. Yeah. So here. This section here is a flow bowl. So all very technical skating terms, but this is generally used by skaters but can be used by all types of small wheels, essentially. We've got a box jump park here, which is primarily used by BMX but also can be used by skaters. This area here, Mogu Land, which is generally aimed at small children. It's just a bunch of small little humps. And then the other key feature here is a pool bowl, which is a big ticket item and something that everyone we spoke to wanted. Yeah, in and out, yeah. Oh. So this just shows some 3D images of what some of the key features could look like. We are working on a flyover, 3D flyover that will demonstrate to everyone what it will look like. So in terms of cost, the estimate is about 2.1 million. That obviously we've designed it so it can be broken down into different stages, and those costs show what those stages would be. This does not include any art features, car parking, access or other similar facilities that might be required. Going through this process, a couple of other possible developments have also been identified that would complement the skate park and provide kind of a wheeled park, I guess. A sealed pump track. This project was identified by the Rotorua Trails Trust. It primarily provides for BMX and mountain bike, but also is quite often used by skaters, these types of facilities. I do not think there is one in New Zealand currently, but it is becoming a bit of a fad in the States. I guess the key thing for talking to the Trails Trust is it could host large-scale events. The other one is a junior cycle skills track. This is an item out of the Urban Cycling Strategic Plan. Essentially, it simulates real-world conditions to train kids how to navigate safely on bikes. It is dependent on future funding through the government's urban cycleway funding, but would really benefit families and schools. So we feel like those two projects really complement the skate park and could provide a range of activities for different users. So this is a really conceptual design that our landscape architect has done, but is really just trying to illustrate the potential of the park to provide for all of those activities. So in terms of next steps, we want to put this out for wider community engagement on the design and the potential use of the site for future development. Our intention how to do that is to use Council's new online engagement tool as the key item. Also like to have an on-site community open day where we can invite anyone who's got an interest in it to come and talk to us directly, and have direct engagement with any residents and businesses that are adjacent to the site. That feedback will then be brought back through the long-term plan. That's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Stephanie, thank you very much. I'm delighted with the presentation, and I want to applaud you in the engagement, in particular with the young people. I've had feedback from them, and they've said the staff have just been fantastic. Your worship.
That's much more reflective of what I hear from some people, but there's and I like you saying staged, because this could go on forever. But there's another group that have talked about a pathway, just a wheel pathway, and I suppose that's rollerbladers. It's also people learning how to use mobility scooters when they first have to start to learn to use it to navigate around. And it's just a potential to use the terrain that is all along Pererika Street. So it may be an access agreement with Whakaui or, to their reserve land, that it could be taken further so that people get the confidence. And the other aspect of it was seating, because when older people go out with their grandchildren, which they do, especially with your cycle skills track, which I'm thrilled to see is in there. That's absolutely key for us if we're going to be a cycle city. They want to be able to sit down and just sort of watch rather than just sit on the edge of the track. So that, you could keep developing this, I know, but I like the fact that you've got the fundamental components there, and then there can be add-ons over time, but you've got to allow for it so that the pathway or the rollerblade pathway could be something that is put in but staged, as we go. But it's good to see it back.
Just coming up with what you're talking about, if, for example, this is for a discussion at the next LTP, the community, after the consultation, comes back and says we want to do these things, like with the Energy Event Centre, we did it once and we did it well. And if you stage it, people will just lose interest. So my goal as sport and recreation leader is to get it done properly, get it funded by the philanthropics. Council is providing the land and the expertise, and we can get it sorted. So I think it's a discussion for the LTP process again, but Stephanie is seeking not support, she's seeking the next step, which is to go back out and engage with the concepts that have been designed. Councillor Gould.
Mr Chairman, have you ever thought of putting in a coffee cart with seating for caregivers to watch their Mukapuna or grandchildren performing the skate park? Because that would be some way of getting more community involvement. You know, just give them a chance to have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something, or, you know, sit down on might be a number of park benches around the particular skate park area.
Again, through you, the Chair, all our parks have the opportunity for leases for commercial sort of activities, so that's a good idea, and that would be something that we would, I'm sure, find someone to take up if it looked like it was going to present an opportunity for them.
Thank you, Chair. Rob, does any of this, all the different names you got for the different little activities that are going on, is there any possibility of the funding coming from government for this, or assisting with this?
The funding for this it depends on how it's packaged. There's going to be philanthropics interested in the skate park itself. I would imagine in the urban cycle component of it would be very ripe for government funding, because it's a cycle education program, and we know other similar facilities in Napier and places like that and Cambridge have had them funded. So the idea would be further investigations as we approach the long-term plan would be, okay, how can we package this sort of multi-use facility together, and what is the interest out there from philanthropics, government, and then what might be required as well to seed fund it from council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned that cost of 2.1 whatever doesn't include the car park and so on. What's the total cost likely to be? And secondly, what is the figure that was actually allowed for in the long-term plan? The
total cost, we've still got to investigate that further. That 2.1 is because we've had the more detailed concept work done on the skate park component of it. By the time you add a car park, you might be talking 100,000 for a car park, depending on how big it is. The cycle education area, again, we would need to look at developing that concept further. So we don't have the answer to the total cost question yet. We really have the more detailed information on the skate park component. In terms of the long-term plan around funding, we don't have a provision for it within the current long-term plan, which is why we're targeting the next 1828 plan. We have used some of our parks funding in terms of understanding and engaging, and also involving a consultant and actually working out what the youths want in there, and then we'll roll into that funding question in the next LTP.
So would it be safe to say that basically what you're proposing to go out with is likely to be a $2.5 million type project?
It depends on the scale. I would think that if we include the urban cycle area, the education area, we would be looking at a figure slightly higher than that. And again, the sealed pump track, we've had strong support from the Rotorua Trails Trust, who are able to actually obtain funding themselves, that they would like to see that sort of facility there as well. So we don't know what the figure is going to be in the LTP that we would expect either the total component to cost or the ratepayer component to be. We'll do that as we get closer to the LTP development.
Thank you for your questions on cost, Councillor King, because they are really important, but some of us have had interim discussions, and some of the main philanthropic people can't wait to get their hands on this. Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for your presentation. It certainly looks like a rather interesting proposal that's come forward, and it's good to see it in perspective, especially for those that aren't accustomed to the terminology and stuff you mentioned. I just wondered perhaps if you could please just explain the process from now in a little bit more depth, because I do just don't want to run the risk of people's expectations, and that we've got a section of the community that sees this and expects that it's going to happen, and also a section of the community that might freak out a bit, for want of a better word, for seeing this being put out. So just if you could explain how it's going to go forward as a concept into perhaps something more final later.
So the next steps from here are to put the design and I guess the concept of upgrading the skate park out for wider engagement. To allay your fears, I think we just need to be really clear about saying we don't have any funding for this at the moment, and that the next steps will be to take the feedback, potentially make some amendments to the design of the skate park if that's the feedback we get from users, and then bring it back to council for consideration in terms of approval and potentially allocation of some funding. But I do anticipate that we will need to get quite a lot of external funding to get this off the ground. So I think it's just about being really clear with our messaging and making sure that we're upfront and transparent about how that's going to work.
Just to elaborate, I guess what I'm thinking is people might get confused on whether this is from the council saying we would like to have a new skate park, do you approve of 2 million, or from the community saying would you like to have a new skate park, because it actually came originally from the community. So I guess that's just where I'm going, or we just have to manage that quite carefully. So that it's not looking like straight after a whole lot of big projects like the one we just walked through, and we're going out straight away with another thing that actually did come through a submission. Yeah.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou. Just, is there, I know when we had that first discussion about this, there was a certain cost that was only to do with the plaza area. I think you're calling it the plaza or something. Put it up there. I'm just wondering, and then there was potential for an onflow of other things that spread over the area. I think you're aware, Rob. I'm just wondering, is that all council land? Or is it still in the land swap thing?
Yes, that's correct. We're going through a land exchange process with Rotorua and Rotorua. Land areas around there. The idea, and that was part of it, is there's a section of this on the left-hand side as you're looking at the screen, which is actually part of the old railway corridor and is Pukeroa land, and as part of that swap further to the left as this picture is concerned, this would then give us and that was part of that justification for the land swap, is that it gives us an actual contiguous piece of land we can use.
Reason I ask is that I'm assuming you might have a time frame of when that's going to happen officially, that land swap. Kia ora.
We're working through that process at the moment. It involves third parties, including the Department of Conservation. It also involves a recognition of the value of the land that has to be written off Crown books, and so we're just working how we actually manage that process with a number of parties at the moment. So it's not quick, unfortunately, but it's the intent and the principle is very clear. It's very clear that we're going to make it happen, and so we're working through it.
Rob, kia ora.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a little bit of a follow-on from Councillor Tapsell, because I think it's this whole engagement and communication at some stage is actually engagement with the community is actually going to be so important. Just recently I've had a couple of conversations with people. I have to admit that they're older people, they're on fixed incomes, and they are concerned about what they believe is our fixation on youth. And I'm just quoting really what they're saying, which I find, well, why not? You know, this is a city for everyone. So I just think that perhaps in our communication and engagement strategy, we need to emphasise the value of something like this. And so that, I mean, I can understand people on a fixed income being a bit concerned, but the fact is that, you know, our youth are an important part of our community, and we want to make sure that they're growing up healthy and well. And but there's again this sort of tension, and it's coming through in some of the communications I'm getting, and I'm sure some of you are as well, and some of the people who are stopping me in the street and saying this, we're getting somewhat fixated with youth. Don't know what. I bet maybe it's the bike, cycleway, or well, goodness knows, I'm not sure. But I don't think we're getting fixated with youth. They're part of our community. But I think the communication and engagement with the community in this exercise is really important.
Thank you. I resist the urge to make a comment about that. Most of the cost of this is up front, my understanding, with concrete structures like this. So what is the kind of OPEX and ongoing maintenance? Because we've got some youth spaces already in our community. I mean, I drive past Karinga Park every day. Am I right in assuming that actually they're not that high once the facility is built?
That's a very good question, Councillor. We could actually have a look at that, but just from the top of my head, and I think of our involvement with contractors and things like that, they're not particularly high. I mean, it's not that we're there having to do major repairs or graffiti cleanup or anything like that. I mean, if they're well activated space, they're reasonably well looked after and respected, and that's part of engagement with the actual users. If you build something that the users really want, they also tend to have a higher level of ownership, and I think that we will not have a significant OPEX cost ongoing as a result of this. Probably having it in a better state than it is now will probably actually mean we have a less OPEX cost.
Well, on that note, I will speak to that issue raised about focusing on youth. We're often criticised, we were certainly 4 years ago, that we had people loitering, there was nothing for them to do. In fact, 6 or 8 years ago when the skate parks were first mooted, it was driven by the youth for something to do in their communities. And I know how much Karinga Park is used, and there is hardly any graffiti. There are people there of all ages, and it's not just when free parking turns up for their scheduled events. I'm seeing families go down there that I have never seen with their little helmets and their bikes and all sorts of wheels. And I'm also seeing a lot of young girls out on skateboards, which thrills me. I wish I'd been able to learn when I was young. I'm a little old now. But I think that this focus on youth is multi-pronged. It's about the health and well-being of our community, and if we can provide environment where physical activity is the main driver. It's a smoke-free place. It's in the fresh air. This meets all of those needs that many of those very people who are on fixed incomes have expressed that they're afraid because there's all these youth doing nothing. Well, we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're providing them to do something. It's healthy. Many of these will actually end up making careers. Some of these people make careers out of doing their training ground on here, just as people do if they have a mountain in their backyard. So I'm really looking forward to the community feedback on this. It is a steep upfront cost. There are lots of willing partners out there, and this is driven by the community. We're willing partners supporting them, and we've got a whole bunch of other partners who are also there to support. So I look forward to the feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ride on motorised Zimmer frames and ride on mobile things. So it depends who you mix with, of course. But Your Worship,
So good things take time. I think Bob Martin and I and you, Charles Sturt, were councillors in 1996 when we first brought a proposal for a skate park to that council. We were on another planet. We were completely on another planet, and it was my young teenage boys that made me get interested and find a group to get together to say we want a skateboard park. All we're doing is looking at the next generation, for the next generation of the kids in our town who still are asking us for something to do, and I'm so impressed that they want it out in an open space like this. I think that's very affirming that the councillors back in the day made the right decision about where it could go, and it was that public visibility, the safety of our kids, the ability to park, We're just asking for the next generation, and we've learned a lot. I think it's very exciting, and I love seeing the activity down there. So I say go right ahead, go out there, and it's now my grandchildren that are asking me, when are we going to do something about that skateboard park, Nee? And those kids that used it, and used it well, back in the day, are now major riders in our forest, and that's the kind of community that we ought to be growing.
Support to your worship, Stephanie. We don't even need to support this in principle. Is the committee happy that they take the next step and engage with the young people? The ideas, as your worship said, came from the young people. The young people have been engaged. So our next step is that we re-engage with those people to show them some concepts, see what's required, see what they want included or not included, then come back to council for inclusion in the 2018 long-term plan.
Just to be clear, I think it's really important that we engage with the wider community too. So we have engaged with the youth, but there are some residential properties and some businesses around there that might have some concerns that we'll need to consider. But also, it is about our parents and our adults as well. So it is the wider community engagement that this next step will really target.
Your
we
worship.
take the next step, to move on. But please take on board the comments that Councillor Tapsell had raised. No matter how much we tell them that, it reminds me of the sculpture held by Te Puia. No matter how much we tell people, NZTA are paying for most of it, we're paying something towards it. There'll be people rioting or still coming at us and saying, no, it's you, council, something like that.
Well, another success story, Councillor Hunt raised it, a success story with Kotu, Karinga Park. You want to see the success story that's happening at Puketawhero, where we put those toilets in. We had to fight like cat and dog to get those toilets for the rugby league people. Now they're putting in the new playground extension, and the kids just can't wait to get in there and they designed it. And I think that's the secret, Steph, by the engagement that you're doing with the young people who came forward initially. And there's a lot of philanthropic people who want naming rights, I hope, and all sorts of things. I think this is an absolute flyer and a goer, but we've got to go through the right steps. So you've got the general gist of the committee. Go forward. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Any other questions on sport and recreation? On pages, over to page 52. You're Mr. Wadu.
Kia ora, just a quick one. More of a, wanting an update. So, Rob, we've got the Lions tour coming up. I'm pretty keen on that. You've mentioned it about 3 times already. But just wondering where you're at with your planning, and also if you were aware that, all of us, that there is also a Māori Economic Summit being held that weekend as well, and a National Freshwater Hui on the same weekend here in Rotorua. So it's going to be extra packed.
Do you want to answer it, Rob? Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, was aware of the summit, surprisingly wasn't aware of the freshwater hui. I should have been more aware of that one. In terms of what's happening with the Lions, so from the operational perspective at the stadium, a lot of work's going on there. The grounds, because they've also got a lot of training ground as well, and we've got women's games, international women's games in the lead up. We've got 2 international women's tests occurring, one at Smallbone and one on the field as the curtain raiser. So operationally, a lot of stuff happening in the field. Extra.
Did you say Smallbone?
Yes, on the cricket.
Oh, cricket.
Yep. So we've got the. I think it's the first one is. The second game is the women's. The women's Black Ferns playing against the English team. I think the first one's Canada and Australia, maybe. So, there's a whole lot of activity around game day as well. Leading up to it, we've got Matariki parades on Friday night. So, given that it's a that's the Maori All Blacks. You know, we're really trying to push the cultural message as well. So we've got a Matariki All Stars Parade on Friday night. There's a variety of other events happening in terms of Thursday night market, including players and that, and getting more promotion happening there. On game day, we've got the world record haka attempt down at the lakefront. The EEC has got the Maori All Blacks history display going on. So there is a bit of paper coming around later that sort of outlines what's happening, and there is actually a very good website link that sort of lists a whole heap of activities that are happening. So lots of things going on.
Thank you, Rob, and nice presentation down the event centre too with the Rotorua. Awesome. Kia ora.
Right, Councillor Gould.
Chairman, thank you, Rob. I'd like to appreciate your services of yourself and your staff for the Lion Marathon this Saturday. You know, people like Eric Court who have given themselves available for Saturday for the water part, and like yourself and your team, which are going around assisting and making that one of the top events in New Zealand for this particular weekend. Thank you very much.
I'm not running, but it is this weekend. Oh, okay. Mr. Martin?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to bring it to the table that I haven't spoken with Rotorua Rugby Club or Kahukura Rugby Club, but when we did that, I think it was, can't remember which team it was that came out, Council got a lot of criticism of doing a screen, etc., and didn't consult with the rugby clubs that were internally in town. So I would just make the suggestion, if I could you please make contact with perhaps Kahukura and Rotorua? And say, is there any way we can help you or whatever it might be, and show that we're proactive with them, because they were upset that everything went down to the event centre, I think it was, or what it was, Sportsdrome at that stage, and not inside their own buildings. So just a good liaison, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. We do have the free fan zone at the EEC again this year because the game's been sold out, and we have had quite a bit of comment from the public saying what's available. I will talk to our major events team and make sure that they've had a talk with those clubs, because I know Kahukura generally has something on, because I've had feedback from the holiday park next door that they think that's great, and so we'll make sure that we've talked with those clubs.
There's an advisory group that Crispin's got working on the sub-events with the Lions tour, so that's been going on for at least 6 months. Okay, one more, Ms. Wadu? Oh, sorry, okay. Right. Would someone like to move? We go back to, we've got I just have to put it to the vote. Okay, it's been moved, Councillor Maxwell, seconded Councillor Tapsell, that the operation report for March to April 2017 be received. I thank you for your indulgence, a very heavy workload for the whole staff. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Would someone like to move that, that we go into confidential? Mr. Wadu, seconded Councillor Tapsell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. We have on page